Today marks a deadline. It is 60 days since President Trump gave official notice to the US Congress that his war with Iran had begun. And under the legislation, which has existed since the Vietnam War, the president is under obligation to withdraw US forces or seek congressional authorization to fight on. Right now, there's no sign the president is preparing to give way. In fact, all indicators point to the conflict resuming. US Central Command has just requested the deployment of hypersonic missiles to the Middle East to add to an enormous military deployment already in the region. In Israel, where the calls for a return to war are getting louder, the build-up is already underway. The Defence Ministry has talked about 6,500 tonnes of munitions arriving in Israel in just the past few days. Dozens of US fuel tankers are parked at Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion Airport and at the airport in Eilat. These are pictures from February showing US Air Force Stratotankers parked on the tarmac. The Pentagon says it is drawing up options for a short, sharp campaign to try and prise open the negotiations. But at what cost? The Pentagon says so far they have spent a conservative $25 billion on this war, and Democrats are getting increasingly twitchy about where it goes next.
On Iran, ultimately, I would defer to the White House and White House counsel on that. However, we are in a ceasefire right now, which our understanding means the 60-day clock pauses or stops in a ceasefire. They're not in. Yeah. It's our understanding, just so you know.
Okay, well, I do not believe the statute would support that. I think the 60 days runs maybe tomorrow, and it's going to pose a really important legal question for the administration. We have serious constitutional concerns, and we don't want to layer those with additional statutory concerns.
Ultimately, the final decision is for the US president. It is not in the hands of the Israeli prime minister, though Israel strategically does seem to prefer a return to war than a deal. Israel and Hezbollah have continued to attack one another in spite of the ceasefire. Lebanon's health ministry says Israeli airstrikes in the south killed at least 15 people on Thursday. The US Embassy in Beirut has urged Lebanon to engage directly with Jerusalem, suggesting there is now limited opportunity to take advantage of the American mediation. Let's bring in our correspondent in Jerusalem, Yolande Knell. Does it feel to you like there is a groundswell now in Israel for this war to resume?
Well, we have had these comments from the Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz last night, where he said that Israel may soon be required to act against what he said were existential threats from Iran. And the Israeli media is saying that the country is on a state of heightened alert, preparing for a possible return to fighting with Iran. And in the background, these reports that President Trump has had his military options laid out for him by the leaders of US Central Command. There's a lot of speculation in the Israeli media about what the different options being weighed up could really look like, with suggestions that there could be a return to some strong, powerful strikes targeting Iran's energy infrastructure, government infrastructure, once again trying to put pressure on Iran to make concessions in negotiations. There's also other options being talked about the idea of special operations forces going into Iran and really targeting its enriched uranium, with all the difficulties that would pose. Also suggestions about ground forces possibly going to try to take control of part of the Strait of Hormuz to ease it up for commercial shipping. But no real decisions made as yet, and really everyone watching to see what decisions come out of the White House. It's interesting too, that report that she mentioned from Bloomberg, suggesting that CENTCOM has asked for this hypersonic missile to be sent to the Middle East, potentially to be used against Iran. If that were to happen, it would be the first time that it had been used in active hostilities. CENTCOM not commenting on that.
The Iranians have signalled this morning, Yolande, that there will be a major response if the strikes resume. Has Israel had time in the interim to replenish what it needs to defend the country?
I mean, certainly this is something that the country has been preparing for, a resumption of hostilities ever since that sort of tentative ceasefire came into force. And it's very well known that, things remain extremely difficult, that the Strait of Hormuz, this important pressure point, is still such a focus, and that President Trump may have to act soon. He's under a lot of domestic pressure. Certainly the feeling from many Israelis is that this is not a job that has been completed as yet. What Israelis have been saying consistently is that they want to deal with the threat from Iran in terms of its missile arsenal, in terms of its support for proxies around the region, and of course in terms of its nuclear program, and they do not feel that that has happened yet.
Yolande Knell in Jerusalem, thank you very much. Let's get a view then from the United States. We can speak to the national security correspondent for the New York Times, Eric Schmidt. Eric, it's good to see you. What are you hearing about the plans that are being presented to the president?
Well, as your correspondent mentioned, the military has presented plans to the president. These are actually plans that have been in place for a while now. We're just kind of reminding him what's at stake here. The U.S. has 2 carrier strike groups in the region. They've been adding additional weaponry, as your correspondent has mentioned, in the event the president orders a resumption of strikes. But President Trump, by all accounts that we've heard, is very reluctant to restart the war here. He's worried that the Iranians still have thousands of missiles and drones left, that they could retaliate against energy infrastructure in the region and send economic and oil prices even higher. He seems to be leaning toward extending the naval blockade, but aides tell him that could take weeks or months to put the kind of pressure on Iran's regime that would yield results.
Because the open question, obviously, Eric, is whether these further strikes would prise open what is already a difficult negotiation.
Exactly. And of course, the regime that's in power now is much more hardline, and even the regime that existed under the Ayatollah, the supreme leader before the war started. So by all accounts, they are digging in. They've used this 3-week ceasefire time to dig out some of their missile silos and to rearm themselves, move around some of their assets, and prepare themselves for what they think may be an oncoming resumption of attacks by the United States and Israel.
The president, quite obviously, is his own man, and nobody can really double guess which way he'll turn. But who is in his ear? Clearly, Prime Minister Netanyahu wants a resumption. There are strategic reasons why Israel thinks they need to go further. What about the council around him in the White House? Because Pete Hegseth, we know, is very confident. And then we have the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who has been leading the negotiation, who was opposed to this war.
A lot of nervousness now about the Senate. The mood is just very grim. I think.
Apologies. Yeah, I mean, within the cabinet, you've identified the key actors. Vice President Vance has made it known that he's very reluctant to continue this war. But the president has key options, people listening to him. These are people like Senator Lindsey Graham, retired General Jack Keane, who are urging him to restore the resumption of strikes. They say just 2 more weeks of concerted strikes on Iran's infrastructure and other military targets will bring the regime to its knees and to the bargaining table.
The United States says it will withdraw 5,000 of its troops from Germany as a rift widens between the 2 countries. The Pentagon said the troops would be removed over the next 6 to 12 months. The decision comes amid President Trump's spat with the German leader, Chancellor Merz, and a day after Mr. Trump called Mr. Merz and said he was doing a terrible job. He also criticised Germany and other NATO allies for not sending forces to help open the Strait of Hormuz. Earlier this week, Friedrich Merz suggested the US had been humiliated by Iranian negotiators. The US has a significant military presence in Germany, with more than 36,000 active duty troops assigned to bases across the country as of last December. Our North America correspondent Peter Bowes explained why we're hearing this news now.
A couple of days ago, when the president was speculating about this, suggesting that there would be a review and an announcement made in due course, the reports in this city were that the Defence Department was taken by surprise, some would say shocked, by what they were reading. Now, just a couple of days later, the Pentagon is announcing that 5,000 troops are to be withdrawn from Germany. As you say, about 36,000 US troops stationed in Germany, the most of any country in Europe. So that is a significant number. And the backdrop, of course, is that spat that you referred to between the German Chancellor and President Trump, and the disagreements that they have over the war. The reservations of the Chancellor really go back to the beginning of the war, when he was warning then of the economic implications of this war. But his language has become much more critical in recent days, suggesting that Washington was being humiliated by Tehran, and also criticising Washington's strategy over the war, which does seem to have got under the President Trump's skin.
And, of course, President Trump not only not happy with Germany, but he's also hit out at other NATO allies like Spain and Italy. I suppose they'll be watching carefully now.
Exactly. He's talked about Italy and Spain. We know that he's been critical in general terms over their support, or lack of support, as he sees it, for the war in Iran. But he was asked directly whether he would consider withdrawing troops from those countries. He hasn't made any decision on that, but was clearly open to the possibility. And if this were to be a wider thing in terms of withdrawing American troops from European countries, I think there would be severe concern across Europe about America's commitment and resolve in terms of its role in NATO. NATO, of course, strongly criticised over a number of years by this president, but most recently in relation to the war in Iran.
And, of course, on the war in Iran, President Trump has to make a decision about what to do next.
And he hasn't made that decision. If he has, he isn't telling us about it. He's been asked on a number of occasions directly, will he start the bombing again? And his response is always, well, why would I tell you that? He's clearly keeping his options open. He appears to have seen the latest proposal from Iran. We don't know the details of that proposal, which was sent to intermediaries in Pakistan. But it's obvious that President Trump has seen something, and he says he doesn't like what he has seen. And once again, he's been criticising Iran for its leadership. He doesn't seem to know who he is dealing with. He says that is one of the major issues, and is being particularly vague about what his next move will be.
Peter Bowes reporting from Washington. Well, Daniel Treisman is a professor of political science at the University of California and co-director of UCLA's Center for European and Russian Studies. He told us why he thinks the US is cutting troops in Germany now.
Trump has been talking for some time about reducing US troops in Europe. It fits in with his general strategy of trying to pressure Europe to pay for more of its own defense and supply more of its own munitions and personnel. But it clearly happened in the midst of this disagreement, this tension between President Trump and Chancellor Merz. And clearly the comments of Chancellor Merz recently didn't help this at all. So I think it was triggered by the comments of the German Chancellor, but fits into a broader strategy that has been building in the background for some time.
Yeah, so how do you think it will go down in Germany and the wider Europe? Would you think they would have expected something like this?
I think they would have feared it. This sort of thing was clearly coming, and European countries have been at least starting to invest more in their own defense, to outline significant plans. They've agreed to spend 5% of GDP on defense, broadly construed, including 1.5% for infrastructure. But this is happening perhaps faster than people anticipated, and it really sends a terrible signal at this moment when the eastern boundaries of NATO are really in an uncertain state. It's not clear just how strong the defenses are against potential hybrid or even more aggressive attacks coming from Russia.
Now let's turn to the Iran war and all of its many consequences. The UK government has announced contingency plans in case there are jet fuel shortages this summer as a result of this war. The International Energy Agency has warned that unless more fuel can be brought in from elsewhere, Europe as a whole will face shortages by next month. Here's our business correspondent, Mark Ashdown.
Most airports operate at near full capacity, so the smooth running of takeoff and landing slots is crucial. The current squeeze on jet fuel supplies has led to fears of last-minute cancellations this summer. If airlines fail to fly a slot, at least 80% of the time, they could lose it to a rival. These new rules mean they can temporarily hand a slot back, saving fuel and ensuring more flights are fully booked. They would have to give 2 weeks' notice to passengers of any flight changes. The government hopes it will reduce the risk of last-minute cancellations.
I am confident that the majority of people that are travelling this summer will have a similar experience to last year. There may be a need for airlines to trim their schedules slightly. The global flow of jet fuel has adapted dramatically in recent weeks.
But the UK does import 65% of its jet fuel, a significant amount from the Middle East, but also from America, and some is refined here. The airlines have been clear there's no current shortage, but these plans are aimed at allowing them to better plan and minimise disruption.
What the government's doing here is basically just saying, yeah, we're trying to avoid the possibility of last-minute trauma to people's holidays. So, really, you might find that you're told, if you're flying from Gatwick to Nice in the south of France, yeah, we've cancelled your flight, but there's another one an hour earlier, so off you go.
The UK now has just 4 refineries after 2 were recently closed. They're being asked to maximise production, and it's possible airlines will be allowed to use lower-grade jet fuel from the US too. Consumer groups say there needs to be more assurances around passenger rights, but it's hoped greater flexibility for airlines can help ensure a smooth summer of travel. Mark Ashdown, BBC News.
Well, let's pick up on some of those points in Mark's report with John Strickland, Director of JLS Consulting, an independent air transport consultancy. John, we heard that airlines are saying there's no current shortage, but how close, give us an estimation how close they are to the wire when it comes to jet fuel and how much they hold?
Well, fuel supplies and deliveries by normal measures are something which is quite short time frame. It's not unusual for airlines not to know, 6 to 8 weeks ahead where that fuel is coming from. It's just assumed the supply will come through. There's a big regular dialogue, of course, with the fuel suppliers. As your report there said, up until recently, more than half that fuel has come from the Middle East region. But there's been a lot of adaptation taking place, as we also heard there, to source fuel from elsewhere, including parts of Africa and particularly the USA. But what we've heard today with the plans from the government, with a short consultation due this week, is to allow airlines this flexibility on the use of slots, which means that if we were to get to that situation where there was an actual shortage, there will be flexibility for airlines to be more prudent, more careful about how they plan their capacity, and if they see opportunities to do a bit of pruning and take flights out, to conserve fuel, be able to do it in a way that protects the journeys of passengers as planned this summer. And I would think in some ways, more importantly, into the winter, that's where there would be potentially more cancellations than we will see this summer, because airlines I'm speaking to are expressing calm and relative confidence about being able to deliver their planned summer flying programme, certainly the next 2 to 3 months ahead. They're not complacent, but optimistic.
We saw what happened with the US airline Spirit Airlines ceasing operations. It was quite a wake-up call within the industry. I just wonder, when people are thinking about their travel plans, we're coming up to the summer season, is it better to wait before booking flights, or just to go ahead and book as normal, or go with potentially larger airlines?
I think it's better to book as planned. Normally the advice would be, and I say still is, to book early. Don't hold back, because if capacity is tight, and normally summer does get booked up, but if it had to be any trimming, then seats will go rapidly to the highest bidder, basically. I've got some holiday flights booked myself in June and again in September, and I would recommend people, number one, keep abreast of what is happening in the wider context of the war. Obviously, fingers crossed that comes to a sooner than a later end. And make sure that you're also looking at any communication from your airline if there were to be any changes. But stressing again, airlines are calm about being able to deliver what they plan at the moment. They will do all they can to operate a schedule, because not only is some of the time we want to travel, it's the time we actually make money, hopefully, from flying. So they want to fly the full schedule if they possibly can. And they look at ways of also juggling around aircraft in their fleet, if they happen to have aircraft of different sizes, to make sure that they can get people moved as scheduled.
OK, well, John, as and when we get there, wishing you a good holiday. John Strickland there, Director of JLS Consulting. Thank you.